You ran the evidence course. Can you tell us about that? What was this course about?
Online course. It covered the topic from basically what the evidence is for the basis of the belief of a Muslim. So we looked at, how do we approach the question, etymology, how to approach our ideas, how to, understand, what is the value of knowledge, things like that, all the way to proof for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the contentions against belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the need for messengers, and also the evidences for the divine origin of the Quran as well. So there's about 20 videos in all, but almost 6 hours worth of videos. People can still access it if they want to. So it's there, inshallah. And hopefully, inshallah, I'll also be writing a book on the basis of that as well. So I'm looking to produce that.
Alhamdulillah. So Brother Sharif is somebody who is alhamdulillah qualified, who has actually been involved in da'wah and discussing these issues. And for some of us Muslims, especially living in the West and living in this day and age, questions are pointed at us, fingers pointed at us, that how can you believe in a God who is all-powerful, all-knowing, when we have so many problems? Let me put up a quote here. This is a quote by Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry is somebody who's well known here, and in this quote, this man is how am I going to describe Stephen Fry? He's a well-known character in the UK. He's an intelligent man, and he said, yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation. He's talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It simply is not acceptable. So we have Muslims who, maybe go to and their teachers talk about these issues, and people get shaken that how can there be a creator who is all powerful and yet we have suffering in the world? Do you experience this in Dawah? Do you experience this in our community? Is there this doubt in the minds of some young people?
There is actually. Unfortunately, it's a growing discussion that's taking place amongst the Muslim community, and it's primarily a growing discussion because of that reaction, as you said, because a lot of people are focusing upon Muslims, Islam, and then also specifically the Islamic belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they are bringing out these types of questions to Muslims. I know many brothers whose children, they go to school. These are just ordinary state schools, and in the religious studies department or classes, they get asked this specific question. I remember having to sit down for about an hour or so trying to formulate an answer, help a young kid out in terms of how to answer this particular question known as the problem of evil as well. So they do this, and they do this because they want to, to a certain extent, they argue it's about creating skepticism and a critical mind. But what they try to do and lessen that certainty in regards to Islam. For them, if you lessen the certainty in a religious belief, you're lessening what they term dogma, and therefore they're more open and therefore more liberal in the outlook rather than being very strict in regards to the revelation. So that's how they view things, and so these are the questions that are coming up nowadays.
So the question to you is, how would you answer that question of, if there is an all-powerful creator, why is there evil, suffering, disease, coronavirus, famine, earthquake?
Yeah, so there's loads of angles to answer this question, and I'll try and go through a couple of the points. But I think it's important to maybe mention a story or an incident that happened during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also during the time of Umar radiallahu an. And I think these incidences sort of help explain and exemplify. So during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he established the first Islamic state in Medina, there was a disease. There was a widespread disease. It was well known at that period of time, and as a result, some people couldn't bear the disease and they left. And there was an incident in which a person, he gave bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he tried to retract his bay'ah because he was suffering, and then he ended up leaving. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that Medina is like the bellows. It blows out or it purifies the people within it. In wording. And what the Prophet ﷺ was meaning by this was the fact that if you're going to go to Medina, you're going to go there because of the love of Allah and the Rasul, not because of any quality of life that you're going to get there, because it was difficult, because there was a disease. So you're going there, you know, to really support this da'wah and this deen. Yeah. So as a result, it purified the people of Medina. This difficulty meant that the people who were maybe weak, weren't willing to make that sacrifice to stay with the Prophet ﷺ, they left. And so the people that remained behind were people who were strong iman and therefore had the sabr and the perseverance to struggle with the Prophet ﷺ, whether it was Battle of Badr or Uhud or Khandaq or other places like that. So a difficulty actually resulted in a greater good. Yeah, and we saw this also.
A difficulty in staying in a difficult place resulted in the greater good, which was
the fact that it purified the society, the community. The people that remained were the strong factions within that society. Majority of them. Also, there was some munafiqeen who stayed behind, but the majority became strong in their adherence because they were there for the sake of Islam, and therefore they had that perseverance and strength to struggle with the da'wah. For the da'wah. So this is, I think that point exemplifies how sometimes we see difficulty and we don't see any benefit, but then retrospectively, you know, we start to see benefit, yeah, or a greater good, or something that we just didn't fathom at the time, yeah. There's another famous example in the Quran that's mentioned.
That seems to talk about that seems, the point just came to my mind now. That seems to talk about one of the limitations of us as human beings.
That's right. That's right. And you know the story, Ted, you know, you have Khidr and Musa alayhi salam in the Quran. You know, it's
Surah Al-Kahf that we recite on Fridays.
Yes, that's right. So either before or after Jummah, although that's not quite the case nowadays. But that story exemplifies the point that, you know, I'm sure many of the listeners know of the story, how Khidr, he was doing certain things that from the perspective of Musa alayhi salam was wrong, yeah, maybe even considered immoral, yeah. And Khidr said to Musa alayhi salam, I will do certain things and you'll ask me why. And he said, don't ask me why, because obviously, you know, he's taking instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, you know, the story goes on, he mentions about killing a child, damaging
destroying
the ship,
the boat,
and the wall, repairing the wall of a town where the people were tyrannical, etc. And Musa alayhi salam, at the end, you just kept on asking, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And then Khidr said, right, I'll explain now, and then he explains the reasons behind all of them. Like, for example, why did he damage the boat? Because he said that the people had laden their treasures upon that boat to trade in a far off land, but it was going to go past a king who would have taken that treasure and stolen it of the wealth. So damaging the boat from the perspective of the people, from the perspective of Musa alayhi salam, was wrong. From their perspective, was harmful in that perspective. But the greater wisdom behind it was found with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's instruction to Khidr alayhi salam to damage the boat to safeguard the wealth. And so that's the point, that's the issue in regards to how we sometimes view certain incidences.
So the original question is, will Stephen Fry or somebody looks at some incident of harm, famine, what is happening in Yemen with children, happening in Syria, now the coronavirus, which is affecting old people, frail people, young people, and they would say these are all innocent people, and these innocent people are suffering. And you're saying that actually that's a limited perspective, that's a limited way of looking at the issue. There's other things going on which the human being may not perceive.
That's right. That's part of the answer. If we get into more of the I don't want to get into too much philosophical discussion, but what atheists try to do is they try to argue that there is a logical contradiction in affirming the existence of a creator, affirming the existence of God.
Yeah.
What they're
saying, they may say that God is all powerful, And yet you have this, and God can save people. You Muslims, you Christians, you say that. He's all powerful, he's all good, he saves people on one hand. And on the other hand, along has come a disease which is wiping people out.
Yeah.
So how can this God, na'udhu billah, this is what they would argue, how can you claim he's all powerful on one hand, and on the other hand, he who's supposed to protect you did not protect you from this?
Yeah. That's right. So how can an all-good, all-powerful God allow evil and suffering to exist in the world? If evil and suffering exist, then either God is not all good, or God is not all-powerful but all good, but can't stop the evil. But therefore, if God is not all-powerful, then he's not God. So therefore, if evil exists, which it does, according to what the atheists are saying, therefore God cannot exist. God with all good and all powerful nature.
Okay. What is the answer to that point when they raise it?
To be honest, this was more of a critique of a Christianized view of God. Yeah. So, they talk about, there are a lot of hidden assumptions. The first assumption, obviously, is that God's nature is only all good and only all powerful, and that's it. Yeah. Whereas obviously from a Muslim perspective, we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names. Yeah. Like Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Wadud, yeah. So these Al-Hakim, the wise, these are also aspects of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there can be reasons to occur because the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala results in a greater achievement of good, whatever we term good in this perspective. Yeah, but there could be a greater wisdom behind it, like for example the disease in Medina, or
in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So all of these things resulted in something which actually strengthened the deen and strengthened the Muslims, and therefore was a result in a greater good. So that's the wisdom. So if we accept this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more than just these two attributes, that there are these other attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described himself with, the first way I would answer this question. And that point as well indicates for us that just like Musa alayhi salam, he had his own perspective on things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we all have a very individual perspective on how we view things from our own subjective nature, our own limited information. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim, the all-knowing.
No.
Yeah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows past, present, and future. Yeah. All possible scenarios. And therefore is able to see the bigger picture. Where's the good in a particular issue? Like the coronavirus. Yeah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything and therefore has the full, what some people say, the full picture. That's how another point that we would look at it from that perspective as well.
You've raised an interesting point. Those who question Muslims about this and who point the fingers and maybe attack Muslims about this, we're new people who have come into the picture. The people, the originally questions about this were Christians.
Yeah.
Because the Christians, actually in their language, when clique and society, believe in Jesus and Isa alayhi salam, believe in God, God is all good, God is all kind. These are the attributes that they emphasize. So in the minds of, like if you meet people in the West, the encounter with religious people at first is Christianity. And they say, oh, you guys, you say God is all good, God is all powerful. Therefore, whereas in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he's Shadid al-Iqab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he's Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. So he's kind, he's generous, he's severe in punishment. So our view, all the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses, subhanallah, you name it, it covers everything that humans can think of. So I think Muslims should take a step back, that actually this argument, understand who it was meant for, and we don't fit those people. We're not Christians.
That's right.
You said is what? What's another way?
So another way is to understand, we need to understand what do they mean by evil. Yeah. So
Okay.
when they say evil, they're talking about two forms of evil. What they term moral evil, which is what humans do, and then they
Okay.
talk about natural events like earthquakes or viruses or volcanoes as well
No.
as evil.
No.
So if we take the idea about volcanoes and earthquakes and these types of things, then from a purely materialistic point of view, yeah. So if we take an atheist, from an atheist point of view, these are
Mm-hmm.
just events within the universe. They're following natural orders. They're following natural laws. You can't term them good or evil. Yeah. It's like, for example, saying, well, the black widow spider is an example. After mating with the mate, the male spider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, you're not going to say, well, it's evil. You just say, well, that's its nature. Yeah. It doesn't have any conscious decision-making process. It just undertakes the action. In the same way, earthquakes, volcanoes, they follow natural laws. So from a materialistic point of view, yeah, I'm talking about from their point of view, they can't term these things as evil. They can only term these as events that take place. Yeah. And sometimes an event that might take place that, again, we might term evil or, we don't like a volcano as an example. Well,
Mm-hmm.
a volcano will help fertilize land and allow crops to grow upon it. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore feed people. So again, these are just events and we can't term them good or evil in that perspective. Yeah. Similarly, as Muslims, when we look at the issue of things that are out of control, like an earthquake, like a virus, we don't say whether it's good or evil. Yes, we might not like certain things and we might like, this is the qadar, this is the decree of Allah, the good and the bad of which Allah knows. Yeah, this is how we start to view these things. So the first point on this issue would be to separate the two types of contentious evils, quote unquote, that they're calling for. Is it a natural event? Because if it's a natural event, you can't call it evil. You can only call it an event. The second thing would be the moral evil, the evil that humans do. Yeah. So even from an Islamic basis, we can say, this person's doing an evil, he's going something against the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, some people say, well, why are we allowing, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow human beings to do evil? Yeah. Wouldn't the best situation be to only allow human beings to do good? But again, this presupposes a number of things. But the first thing that we need to look at from this perspective is to say, look, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only allowed human beings to perform good, then the ability to choose evil is removed, which basically means they will not be able to have free will. You have to have
I'm just
processing.
I'm processing that
Yeah.
if okay, so let's come to this issue saying when people look at an earthquake.
Yeah.
An earthquake. I'm trying to remember. Actually, I'll bring one up. Earthquake. So earthquake, you see people die. You see people lose their homes. You see the devastation. Now, when people look at that and they say, this event was there's so much so many people died. This is evil.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll use that language.
Yeah.
And they're saying the creator, how did he allow this to take place? And you're saying that describing that event as evil, are you saying it's incorrect? It's for them to say that, or
so I'm saying that the atheist saying that's evil, they have no ability to assign it as being a morally evil act. For the atheist, they have to affirm that the earthquake took place or the volcano took place because of natural laws that didn't decide to do certain evil. Yeah.
Okay. So really, the atheists, do they actually use this language? I mean, as non-believers in God, is it problematic that they use this language of evil in the first place?
Yes, because evil is a religious term. Evil is a term that's, adopted from religion. to say something is good or evil. These things are something that, you know, are hugely problematic for atheists to affirm. Like as an example, it's a very difficult situation for atheists to affirm free will, the ability for human beings to choose, because your ability to choose, according to the point of view, occurs because of your brain chemistry. Your brain chemistry is unconscious. Your brain chemistry is following, you know, the physical laws of atoms and electrons. These atoms and electrons are just simply following laws that are determined for it. Yeah.
Okay.
So you making a choice is not you making a choice. It's your atoms. It's these blind, unconscious events that are taking place outside of your. Me liking an apple over an orange is not me choosing it. Do you see what I mean?
Okay. So the first, welcome, brothers and sisters. Coronavirus day 3. This is the Coronavirus Diaries, 9 o'clock every day. And our topic today, if there is a powerful God, why coronavirus? You know, in quotes, this is what some non-Muslims say. And we chose this because some Muslims, I know a young boy who is he's a teenager. He works mainly with non-Muslims in his workplace. A lot of his friends are non-Muslim, and from discussing with him, you start to see that he's been affected. He's brought up in a Muslim home, but he's questioning, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exist? And I know that he finds this kind of topics very difficult, because when he's at work and people would say, okay, you're Muslim, you believe in God, and God is very kind, and God is all powerful. Why did that baby die? Why is there coronavirus? Why this? Why that? And you feel that his iman is shaken. And so we feel that at times like this, some of these questions will come up. Some of us who are watching this may say, alhamdulillah, we're okay. But I think it's to realize that we do have some Muslims out there in a world which is very secular, where the secular ideas, don't believe in God, God does not exist, God is not all powerful, are being pushed. So Brother Sharif has, first of all, he's dealt with the issue of how they look at the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, limit only Allah to be powerful and kind, and that's it. We don't accept that view as Muslim. And now we're looking at this question of evil. Now you're saying free will. So let's wrap up this section of evil and where the problem is, how to understand it correctly, and what is the incorrect understanding.
Yeah. So just really quickly as well, just as a side point as well, there's always two parts to this question about the problem of evil. The first part is a philosophical discussion, an intellectual point, and that, to be honest, is quite easy to deal with. You can intellectually understand that actually I shouldn't really use this as an argument to disprove or say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't exist. But there's an emotional argument, there's a nafsiyah, which is a lot harder to address sometimes with certain people.
Okay, so let me play that back to you. You're saying that somebody can think in his mind, he can look at, you know, this room that I'm in right now, and the plants and the sun and the sunlight, and he or she can't argue that there is not a creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
So whatever the argument being put against him, he's saying, no, you know what, it makes sense to me that there is an all-knowing creator of this universe.
That's right. And
that's the intellectual part. Somebody can accept that in his mind.
And even the refutation or the response to the argument atheists bring in regards to the problem of evil, there is still an intellectual point, which is that for them to claim that there is a logical contradiction in the nature of God being all powerful, all good, and allowing evil, therefore God can't exist. Like a squared circle can't exist. So we can answer that by saying, well, yeah, like we mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has more than just these two attributes. One. Two, we can say that perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a total perspective, and therefore there may be good, wise reasons that we are not aware of. Three, we can say that natural events cannot be determined as being morally good or morally evil. Because natural events from the atheist perspective are just events. They're just things that happen by the laws of nature. You know, just on this coronavirus as an example, you'll get evolutionists that will turn around and say, well, actually, this is good for the evolution of the human species, you know, because human beings may die, but as a result may get immunity and therefore become stronger or whatever. They might use saying actual creates better, you know, more adapted life forms to survive. So these are just events that are taking place. This is what we could say. And then the other point, which is this, is that human beings, for them to be able to make moral decisions, requires them to have free will. There is a problem with atheists when they try to affirm everything is naturalistic, has a naturalistic explanation, as a material explanation. Chemicals, atoms, materials, laws, forces of nature, etc. Because then you have a problem to say, where does your free will come from? Does it come from the atoms that don't make decisions, that just happen to give you impulses that then creates a desire? Yeah, do you see what I mean? So there's a problem to decide how do you affirm free will. That's the fifth argument. The other point as well is that if Allah only allowed people to make morally good decisions, takes away free will from the human being. Okay. He can't choose to commit evil.
Okay, so now there comes the question of free will. That you're saying that the atheists, when they come with this attack, this question to the believer, they acknowledge, just, you know, if we look at the world around us, we can see that people decide to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Nobody, I am raising my hand right now. Nobody's holding my hand and forcing me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create my hand to be in this position all day long. I choose to raise it, lower it. I choose to eat. I choose to drink. I am making decisions.
Yeah.
I'm exercising my, what they call free will.
Yeah.
So they accept that.
They accept it because it's intuitive. It's what we all accept. Mm-hmm. But they can't prove it.
Okay. Subhanahu wa ta'ala should allow our good actions.
Yeah.
So you're saying there's a contradiction. You can't say God should only allow good actions. This is what the atheists say.
Yeah.
And then you say human beings should have free will. These two things, what I get from you is these two, one of them is fall down, is these two things, they can't say it coexist. It doesn't make sense.
That's right. That's right. We have to be able to choose morally evil actions in order to be able to affirm free will. Yeah. If we are forced to only do good actions, then we have to deny free will. Yeah. This is an argument that people use to say, well, this is why there are wise reasons and good reasons for Allah to exist, because this allows us to have free will. From a Muslim perspective, that's really important because we are here to be tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are tested with good and with evil, with temptations and the right path, yeah, in order to choose to perform the good.
Subhanallah. You remind me of the ayah, Alif Lam Mim, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this human being think we just created him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the human being the choice to do and what not to do, and based on that he will be very just. Subhanallah.
It's not, and also this is a really interesting point, which is that I tend to find most of these questions about problem of evil tend to come from the West. And even when Muslims sort of like feel a little bit, uneasy about this, it tends to be West. Difficulties and the problems as things to blame God. They rather actually are quite religious people. In the developing world are generally more religious than people living in the West, and that's because obviously there is a natural fitra, a natural instinct within human beings, yeah, which is like, for example, when they say there are no atheists.
There are no atheists on a sinking ship.
Yeah. When you face maybe you face difficulty, your natural reaction is to worship Allah or call upon Allah, isn't it? So even the atheists will turn around and say, do a secret prayer, isn't it, or something like that.
Yeah, they say, God help me, and it's like, well, who are you asking? It's
exactly.
There's some power out there. I'm so desperate. There's some power out there that whatever that power is, help like that.
So it's part of the instincts, part of the nature. Through suffering and difficulty, your natural reaction would be, Ya Rabb, isn't it? Ya Allah, help me with these things. Okay. But what we do is we see in the West slightly different. And the reason why I say slightly different, even though it's part of the fitrah still, but that ideology promotes this idea that your purpose in life is to maximize as much good and pleasure. So we see it as test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They see it as though it's the maximization of good, and maximization of pleasure and happiness. And so if they see this as their purpose, then they say, well, if God exists, then God should be here to serve my purpose, which is to maximize good. If I'm not maximizing my good, my pleasure at every moment in time, then, God must not exist because that's the purpose of my life. You see, this is how some people see it in the West.
Okay, this is an interesting point that the human beings, we've said how the question of evil, whether human beings have free will, some of the arguments we've refuted, but we're saying something which is actually a bit specific to the West or really linked to the West is that life is about enjoying yourself. This is how they see it. Going to cinemas, parties, pubs, whatever that enjoyment is. And if there is a natural disaster, if there is a coronavirus, if there is an earthquake, in ourselves. Yeah. So how can there be a God?
That's right. And when I say West, and obviously what we mean by West, we're talking about the capitalist ideology, the liberal secular capitalist ideology. Which is now infiltrating has infiltrated the rest of the world as well, but to a lesser extent. So it's this idea that then makes people view problems in a particular way, which is that, they can't understand it. They think it must be wrong because how can it contradict my pleasures? Yeah. Whereas for a Muslim who understands the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who understands that, mankind and jinn have not been created except for worship, that this, like you mentioned Surah Ankabut about that we're going to test human beings, test people, just because you say you believe doesn't mean that, Iman really has entered into a person's heart. So as a result, we understand it differently, that this is a test, that there are going to be difficulties, This is the nature of life. And it was really interesting, and this goes on maybe towards more the emotional disposition point of view, which is that if you take the liberal secular capitalist way of thinking about purpose of life is maximizing a benefit, they have no, maybe the word say, psychological mechanisms to deal with problems.
So, but psychological support mechanism. So, what, like when somebody dies, or when there's an earthquake or a coronavirus, how do they cope? How do they think about it? To have peace, to have sakina, if you like.
That's right. So if you've got this mentality, YOLO, YOLO, don't you, Taji?
YOLO, you only live once. That's right. I'm with it. I'm a bit woke sometimes. You know what I mean?
I've known Taji 20 years now, so alhamdulillah, he's my teacher, mashallah.
I don't know about
that. So you only live once. So if you see for happiness and you're not getting it to the maximum amount what you think you're meant to get, and you face disease, you face difficulty, you face, illness, death, loss of wealth, these types of things, this results in people feeling really finding it very difficult to cope with regards to these things. These are difficult, but for a Muslim, these things have got a context to them. So whether you believe in a God or not, for an atheist, the fact is you're going to face these tests, you're going to face these difficulties. That's
life.
That's life, exactly. But with belief in Islam, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know that the tests that you face are not going to be to waste. They're not going to destroy you. This is not your only life and that's it. You've got nothing to look forward to. But rather, we have those emotional stabilizers, the support mechanisms, conceptual support mechanisms to allow us to overcome these problems and these difficulties. We can sort of frame them.
Allah, subhanallah, subhanallah. If there is a powerful God, why coronavirus? This is the question we're unraveling, and we've covered already 5-6 different ways to counter that issue. I think, is it correct to say that, in the Muslim world, these events, when you see people in Syria and, all the bombings and stuff, and you hear them, and it's a Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Hasbunallah. And you're like, they're saying, we depend on Allah. We look to Allah. I mean, after 8-9 years of this quote unquote suffering, the iman is still strong that the one who will make a way out, the one who will look after us ultimately is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, it's interesting how they react even after such pressure and looking for the good in this dunya and the good in the akhirah. Whereas, in the West, a little bit of test and that really shakes people. And this is why
a little bit of test on the streets.
SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah. It's frightening how people change, fighting in the supermarket. For somebody, an old person in the supermarket car park, these kind of issues. So one question before we come into an end now is, we started off by saying that there are some Muslims out there who may actually be affected by this question, maybe the environments they live in, or they don't come across yourself or other brothers and sisters who can help to answer this question from an Islamic side, make the Aqidah and the Iman very strong. And therefore they have these doubts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What advice would you give of how to strengthen one's Iman in the face of these kind of questions we face in the West?
So I think firstly is approaching our belief in the right way. More Muslims grew up in Muslim households and probably never really, understood the evidences behind it. Maybe we've taken Islam as a cultural, thing that we've adopted from our parents, and that's it. So we need to start to go. There's a famous quote from Imam al-Jawaini, who's a very famous, and he wrote in his book, in his introduction, in his book Al-Irshad, and he said the first obligation placed upon a Muslim when he reaches the age of maturity is to prove that there is none worthy of worship except Allah. So he said, and he quotes the verse of Quran, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And so we need to go back and understand this. And then what we also need to do is really appreciate from our perspective how we view these things. Like, for example, the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, who said, amazing is the affairs of the believer. Verily, all of his affairs is good. And this is not for none but other than the believer. If something good or happiness befalls him, he's grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is good for him. And if something of harm befalls him, he's patient, and that is good for him as well. So the Prophet ﷺ is explaining that every aspect for a believer can be a good. Why? Because the difficulties we face, for example, when we face coronavirus, for us, coronavirus is not evil or good. Evil or good. The free will we choose to do. Are we going to despair? Are we going to, steal people's toilet rolls or whatever it is? Or are we going to help our neighbors out? Are we going to, help people in our community? Are we going to, discuss about Islam? Give people, the tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remind them of the sabr. This is the response. And this creates a really unique point in regards to this discussion of, evil and good, and, this problem of evil. Because the way we understand it from an Islamic point of view, it empowers us. It gives us that strength because it tells us we're responsible. For example, Stephen Fry, he quoted Fry, the comedian actor, at the beginning, and he said, there's this parasite that burrows into you know, the eye of a child and all this type of thing. And it's a waterborne disease. Now we see that from a Muslim point of view. What do we say? We say, hold on, why is there no proper sanitation, clean water? What is our responsibility in regards to that? And therefore we take it upon ourselves to say, hold on, why is the infrastructure within the societies of the states? You know, how come the leadership is not using its wealth, you know, for waterways, clean water, which is part of the fara'id, part of the obligation placed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. So we start to view these types of things in this way. And, you know, it goes back to that verse of Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 30, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, you know, the part of the verse was, Inni ja'ilan fil ardi khalifa. You know that verse?
No.
Indeed, we placed upon the earth the mankind as a khalifa. And you know, Imam al-Tabari and Imam Qurtubi as well, in their tafsir, they say that this means political authority. And the reason why they say it means political authority was the response of the angels. This is a really interesting point, because the response of the angels, when they were told that mankind was going to be placed upon the earth as khalifa, they said, why are you going to put people who are going to cause much bloodshed? And so that they understood, the angels, the word khalifa to mean political authority to stop bloodshed. Because they're saying, hold on, you need an authority to implement justice, because you're going to have people commit injustice. So why are you placing people who are going to commit injustice? This is what in essence is saying. So this is the point. From a Muslim perspective, we see evil, we say, what's within our sphere of control? What can we do?
What can we do against this situation? Exactly. How can we help people in the earthquake? How can we stop the bushfires? How can we help the child who's dying when there's a famine? Why is there no sanitation?
Yes.
And therefore children are dying, or you create sanitation and clean drinking water, you solve that problem.
Yeah. And most of the, you know, we're talking about coronavirus, because to be quite frank, the reason why we're talking about coronavirus is because it's migrated from poor countries to richer countries, and the richer countries realized it was going to affect them as well. Whereas, you know, it says 1 million people die of malaria each year. Ironically, they're looking at the anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine as a possible, you know, treatment for coronavirus. So we've got the treatment for malaria. We've got other things that they can do in regards to preventing mosquito bites, etc., to prevent malaria, but there's no action in regards to that. I read a recent report that said that open their doors to homeless people.
What?
Yeah, to prevent them from getting coronavirus. Yeah, take them in. And you're thinking, well, hold on, if they can remove homelessness like that.
Yes. What about in the winter time?
Yeah,
what about,
exactly.
You know, the days when it's freezing, when there's no coronavirus, but end of the year, beginning of the year, it's freezing, 4 degrees outside and people in the cold, but you don't open the...
And the brother mentioned the point is because the homeless people who could be infected with coronavirus can infect other people. The rich within the society.
So you need to get them off the streets.
That's right. So there's a will to act. Okay. Now, that's from their point of view. From our point of view, we have this understanding that when we face difficulties, problems, difficulty, a problem which is good or evil, it's our actions, how we respond to it. Do we have the sabr, tawakkul, and do we act according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with?
SubhanAllah. So a Muslim shouldn't say coronavirus is evil, it affects people, it's dangerous, it can kill. What is our response to it with our neighbors, looking for a cure, helping other people, creating a world that can actually deal with these issues and passing this test in a way that. So, Barakallahu Feek, so really strengthening the aqidah and the understanding is any other tip, or is really that's the main one of understanding one's deen, studying who Allah is, studying proving that Allah exists, and when these issues, corona, malaria come, our issue is how we respond to it. Not is it evil, is it good?
Our deen, Islam, has given us answers to how to approach problems of life. You know, for example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in hadith, he mentioned about how there's nothing that befalls a Muslim, not even a prick of a thorn, except that his, he gets reward for it and his sins are removed. So, we see this. I think there's a brother who asked the question about, why do they die or things like this, yeah? The thing whether you've got a person who believes in God or doesn't believe in God, children will die. But for a Muslim, we see this as this is a test for us, and that inshallah on the day of judgment, in the next life, that if we remain patient, our children will be with us. Inshallah. That provides a sakina. Similarly, with people who are suffering, and maybe subhanallah, they lose somebody from their family, or friends, that they can have that sakina, say, inshallah, we ask for forgiveness, and that we will see them in the next life, inshallah. So it gives such unique vision, and it's empowering. It makes a person able to do things that other people might find difficult. So learning the deen, understanding there's real rational good reasons. There are certain reasons that Islam is true, and then understanding the deen further gives us this, creates a unique type personality, and we try to strive for it. And we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we look at the companions as well. May Allah be pleased with them. And we try to look at how they responded to try to emulate that, inshallah. So this coronavirus, to be honest, it's a difficult time for everyone, but it's a test for us. How are we gonna respond? Are we gonna price hike all the chickens or whatever? I don't know. As some people have been claiming, or exploit the situation, or are we going to respond in a way which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is what we're gonna, this what creates this type of unique person and unique individual, inshallah.
Barakallahu feek. Brother Sharif, thank you very much for that. Brother Sharif, the course, just putting up the poster here. So just tell us about this course, where people can find out more about what you've talked about today, maybe some more details. Where are the videos?
So the videos are unlisted on YouTube, but if they want to contact me for the videos, they can message me on
contact
Facebook.
You via Facebook?
Facebook's probably the best way, Facebook, Sharif Abu Layth. So, contact me via that, and then I'll send over the links if you private message me. Inshallah. Hopefully, it's like a proper course as well, so it's not like a number of videos and things like that. So so if people are interested in that, that's there. One of the videos actually deals with the problem of evil as well.
Comment before we go from one of our shuyukh, Sheikh Muhammad Ismail Abdul Manaf. He says sabr is needed in 3 moments. 1, in the calamity, when something afflicts you. 2, to keep away from haram. And 3, to do good deeds, as Ibn al-Hajar al-Asqalani said, that the test should be responded to with sabr. Brothers and sisters, barakallahu fi. Brother Sharif, thank you very much for joining us. Can I say hopefully can get you on again?
Yes, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for inviting me.
Inshallah ta'ala. There may have been some grillings in the internet, it seems, tonight, but bear with us. In our control, organizing this. How the internet is all going together and behaving when people are at home and they're streaming and the internet is overcrowded, that is not in our control. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from you, from us, to continue da'wah in your work as a pharmacist, in carrying da'wah to explain these ideas. And please join us tomorrow, something from the Quran tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.